Thank you, and once again, welcome back to our live session. This conversation is going to be extremely important. As you know, we are still we're in the tail end of the 2022 midterm elections, and we know that this election will really change the shape of how Congress is going to look over the next 2+ years. We have new chairs, chairs of relevant committees. New members of Congress are going to be coming in who are now having to come off of campaign mode and actually learn, figure out ways to implement some of the things that they promised on the campaign front. And there are a number of different issues that are going to be competing. So, as the anti-hunger community, I think this is a real great opportunity for us to really learn what this election is going to mean from the anti-hunger space, and also, what is it going to take for us as advocates to be able to engage this new Congress with new priorities and a new mission. So I'm going to take this time to introduce our panelists. Heather Valentine is Director of Government Relations at Bread for the World. Monica Gonzales, Director of Congressional Relations for Feeding America. And Jason Gromley, who's the Director of Advocacy and Government Relations for Share Our Strength. We use the opportunity for our panelists to talk about organizations each, and then we're going to open up for some discussions, conversations to talk more specifically about what this election means in our effort to, in our mission, in our drive to end hunger. And then I'll open it up for the audience to have opportunity to have a Q&A. So if you have questions, please put it into the chat. And as moderator, I'll get to them after our discussion. So I'll first turn it over to Heather to talk a little bit more about Bread for the World and your priorities.
Hi, Eric. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Hi. Heather's having some technical issues with her audio, so we're going to go ahead and move on to introducing our other panelists while I troubleshoot with her. Okay. Monica, just make sure you are unmuted.
Okay. Does that work?
Perfect.
Okay. So, hi, everyone. Again, I'm Monica Gonzales, Director of Congressional Relations at Feeding America. Excited to be with you here today. As you know, Feeding America is able to help address and combat hunger through our network of over 200 food banks across the country, where we deliver and distribute millions more than 1 million pounds of food to people in need and to help address their hunger, their food insecurity needs. So looking forward to this conversation, and I'll stop there and turn it over to Jason Gromley to introduce himself.
Thanks, Monica. I hope everyone can hear me. Jason Gromley, the Director of Government Relations and Advocacy for Share Our Strength and the No Kid Hungry campaign. I'm really excited to join you all today to talk about what were some wild election results and how those are really going to impact the direction of policy, both at the federal level, but also down ballot in states and localities across the country. So Share Our Strength and the No Kid Hungry campaign, we're focused on ending childhood hunger in the United States through direct support and partnerships with folks on the ground across the country, but also through grants, through research, and through policy change at all of those levels of government as well. So we're really excited to be here today to share some of our thoughts on what these elections mean. Heather, are you back? Can we hear you now?
I am. I'm sorry. Technical difficulties. Thank you. I'm Heather Valentine with Bread for the World. We are a Christian-based advocacy organization that join alongside Share Our Strength and Feeding America in the fight to end hunger. We work both here in the United States domestically and abroad on foreign issues. Thanks.
Thank you to all three of you for joining us today, and I'm glad we were able to get all the technical glitches out the way, and the game is all here. So I'll start with the first question, and really this question is open to all three of you all, so feel free to jump in. First question is, how will the election results impact how you'll shape your Farm Bill priorities? And we just talked about as the Farm Bill being the central vehicle to really help put us on path to ending hunger in America. So with the new Congress and the new chairs, how do you see this shaping how you will engage the Farm Bill?
Sure, I can go first. I think Bread for the World, we have our Farm Bill agenda that we have been working on this year through working with folks in our field, so our advocates in the field and churches, and general advocates, and taking their input and putting together our Farm Bill priorities, which will focus on a number of issues that we're all concerned about. And I don't think that will change. Obviously, the struggle around SNAP will continue with a Republican-controlled House. But I think when you look at our issues individually, a lot of them we have a ton of bipartisan support on. So I think the approach that we take is really talking to each member individually on both sides of the aisle and tailoring those messages specifically, talking points around that member and what will have the biggest impact in their district.
Monica, you want to go ahead, or I can jump in here? I'm open to either way.
Yeah, no, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. I agree wholeheartedly with Heather and her sentiments. I think that the closer margins on both sides of the Hill are going to make it, I think, a little bit more of a balancing act. But I think that bodes well for us. I think that they're going to have to compromise. They're going to have to find a middle ground on a lot of these policy issues and areas. I think the one thing that I'm constantly highlighting when I'm talking to our partners on the ground across the country is the importance of that local input, bringing the food banks from Feeding America, the partners in churches and in other faith centers, bringing community leaders together to really weigh in with those members and talk about how these programs really impact folks back home. So I agree with Heather. I don't think it's going to change our core priorities for the Farm Bill and how we're going to strengthen SNAP. But it really is going to take a village here to make sure that these newly elected members are kind of brought up to speed on what these policies and these programs really do on the ground in your communities, but also really help them understand that some of those myths around SNAP are just that they're myths, and that's not actually how the program is used by the vast majority of participants.
Yeah, I'm going to actually quote G.T. Thompson from AgriPulse this morning, who basically said, the best bills, the ones that pass and last, are not repealed, are the ones here that are done in a bipartisan manner, and that's my goal. So I think that, G.T. Thompson is going to be very focused on moving a farm bill that is not going to be rewritten by the Senate. He's going to want to make sure that he's going to be able to bring his caucus along. The other piece I would just add is that, this is a razor thin margin on the House side. And so I think it would be fair to say that he's going to need to be able to move that bill with Democrats, as well as a large part of his caucus. So I think he's very skilled. He recognizes that, and he understands the importance of that. I think the other piece that I think bodes well for all of us is that the House Ag Committee membership really did not change very much. Most of the seats that were in play, most everyone held on, with the exception of Maloney from New York. So I think that, at least we will not have to do a ton of re-education. We will have to do some, but not a lot. And so I think that, where I think we could have been confronted with a really significant rewrite of the Farm Bill, I don't think that's going to be done. And I think that G.T. Thompson recognizes the importance of these programs as well. And so I think it's not just what do we need to do to make sure that we bring Republicans along, because I think they recognize that, nutrition makes up about 75% to 80% of the Farm Bill. I think we need to make sure that we're advancing narratives that really underscore that SNAP helps to stimulate the economy. It really helps farmers. It helps lift families out of poverty. So this is a program that lifts everyone up. So I think it's just going to be really important for us to think about how we move this forward, working in a bipartisan manner.
That's a great point, Monica. It made me think. I had a meeting with GT Thompson a while back, and one of the things that he told me is definitely that local focus. We were meeting about CTC, the child tax credit at the time. It wasn't around the Farm Bill, but he, the same message was echoed. And he also really, every Republicans continue to say, work your field, get your field folks to the office and talk about the local economy and the local benefits. And how this is impacting people, not just from the Washington, D.C. level and me going into an office, but using our bread advocates to really carry that message forward.
Right.
You guys really gave a great segue to the next question, and really it's about messaging. With the new members of Congress coming in, not just on the committee, but off the committee. I mean, a lot of folks have their preconceived notions and idea of what SNAP does and who is it impacting and the benefits of it, some positive, some negative. So with the new Congress coming in and being that many of you, all of you have a grassroots component, you have folks on the ground who are in these local districts who can engage these members from a local perspective. How do you see this shaping your messaging moving forward?
Yeah, I'll echo what Monica said a minute ago. It's really emphasizing all of the stakeholders in this process, that it's not just about the anti-hunger community coming to the table, but it's really bringing a full-throated support from the business community, from local retailers, from local elected officials, and having them share how the SNAP program really helps to address hunger in their communities as well. So I think that's a big piece of it. I think it's also just addressing some of those myths head on, and being able to share the data and the research and the information with these members, and not in a confrontational way, but in an opportune way to really share with them, this is how this program actually operates in your community. We're not going to win every battle. We're not going to win everyone over to our side. There will still be opposition, but really pushing back on some of those more hardline positions on the SNAP program, I think, is going to be really key as we go into this tightly divided conference, which I agree we're going to have a farm bill from the middle. But there are going to be a lot of folks, especially on the more conservative end of the spectrum, who are going to be very vocal and very loud, and trying to put a lot of pressure on leadership to move a bill that includes things that are problematic, like work requirements, restricting and pulling back on gubernatorial authority for waivers, lots of things that would wreak havoc down the line here for the next several years if it was included in the Farm Bill. So we're going to have to push back on those things.
I think the one thing I want to add is that, Feeding America has really embarked on centering communities and participants and our neighbors. And so we have really dug deep and really trying to understand what is important to them, because I think we often come to the Farm Bill as kind of the usual suspects in this conversation about, all the policies that, are important, and we get that. But there are things that we recognize and we've heard from our neighbors through various listening sessions, as well as through the research that we have done to really understand, like, what are the changes in the Farm Bill that need to happen that are barriers for the people that we serve. And then, of course, recognizing the important role of the TFAP program and commodities in terms of meeting the needs of people who need access to food the most. The other thing I would just add in terms of, as we think about the Farm Bill, is that it's an opportunity for innovation. That there were so many things that happened through the pandemic that really allowed us to think bigger and bolder about how we can best meet the needs of communities. And so, the online purchasing of food through SNAP EBT, looking for those efficiencies, that low-hanging fruit that really helps us to bring those public-private partner solutions to the table. And so I think that, we're going to go into the Farm Bill thinking about this from a perspective of, what are the lessons that we have learned? What are the innovations? What can we learn from the people who are really participating in these programs and who have a much different frontline view than all of us? And then at the same time, how do we make sure we're meeting the needs of communities that often don't have a seat at the table, tribal communities, rural communities, really recognizing, what do they need to be able to meet the needs of everyone. And so we're going to really approach this about how do we best meet the needs of our neighbors, as well as advancing policies that we know will help create access. So we're excited about the opportunity, and I'm going to look forward to building a lot of relationships with the folks in the ag industry, in the anti-hunger community, and the business community. So it's going to take all of us coming to the table.
Yeah, I agree with one thing Monica said, which was about innovation. Members of Congress really like when you come to them with ideas. We all know that. Often we knock on the door and we're complaining or pushing back. So I think starting conversations around new ideas, around things that, again, are affecting the communities that you serve are so important. I think that anytime you can start a relationship off on some of what Monica talked about, whether it's around SNAP and EBT or whatever it is, but something that's working that they can help support, I think that only opens the door for future and better conversations with that office. Oh.
Eric, you might still be on mute.
I certainly am. So, in piggybacking, thinking about, as you're talking about the different sectors and industries that you look forward to working with, who do you think is who should be at the table that currently isn't at the table? And I say this from the perspective that all three of you organizations are dealing with different constituencies. So from your perspective, from your eyes, who would you like to see at the table who should be engaged on food security policy, nutrition policy, that isn't at the table? And how do we bring them on board?
I mean, one of the things that Bread's doing is we are working with mayors. So, reaching out to individual mayors where constituents are based, and I'm having conversations with them about, being more vocal on hunger. Often local offices don't want to really advertise the negative things that are going on in their district, but really having them step up and be more, more vocal with their members of Congress, with their senators. So, I would like to see more of the local governments, I think, get involved. And, I think with the White House conference that just happened this year, we did see, an uptick in healthcare industry and others. But I think this is, like Monica said, we're all going to have to come to the table on this. So all the partners are going to be pretty important.
Yeah, Heather, I'll just echo the mayor's angle. Share Our Strength, No Kid Hungry campaign. We launched the Mayor's Alliance to End Childhood Hunger earlier this year. Have brought 135 mayors from across the country, from big metro areas to small towns in states across the country, and they're energized, they're excited. But I think that local voice has been really effective in changing the narrative, and especially because it's coming from bipartisan and nonpartisan members of the alliance to elected officials, and sharing how these programs really impact their communities on the ground. I think the other thing that I would just add, and this comes from both Monica and Heather's comments, I think we all need to do a better job of ensuring that the folks with lived experience have a seat at the table, not just that we're propping the door open for them, but they've really got a seat at the table and are able to help, improve these programs from their firsthand perspectives. And I think that there are lots of organizations, Bread and Feeding America do a really great job, and it's something that we're holding ourselves accountable to as well, to ensure that we're being more effective at bringing those folks to the table and giving them a voice in the process as we continue to develop policy priorities, but also as we continue to work towards larger scale holistic change across the federal programs.
I think honestly, Eric, your leadership and what the Alliance has done to really bring together a coalition of diverse communities and interest has been really a best practice and a model for all of us to follow. At Feeding America, we're certainly going to engage and continue the conversations that we've started with our Neighbors Initiative that has been led by Barbie Esquero, who all of you may know. Feeding America has brought her on to be our director of Leading Our Neighbors Initiative, which I think is critically important to making sure that we demonstrate the value of bringing those voices forward. We're going to continue to work with the folks and partners that we work with in tribal communities. I think that food sovereignty among tribal nations is critically important, and we're going to continue those conversations and the work that we've done on that front. I would also say, the anti-hunger community has a long way to go and work to do to make space for leaders of color and leaders who do represent these communities in a very authentic way, because only they can really speak for these communities. And I think that's really important. And we should want them at the table, right? We should want their voice right next to us. And I think that's really important. So I think for Feeding America, we're going to continue. We're going to build out, some coalitions and some partnerships to really make sure that we're working with everyone across all sectors. So yeah, definitely going to be working with all of our food banks and with all of the communities that we serve, and making sure that we make space for them to have a seat at the table.
And another thing that Bread's doing right now is, we work in the faith community, and it differs on how comfortable, and Eric knows this, that people are in reaching out to their members of Congress. So really trying to educate churches and church leaders on why it's important and how it doesn't have to be confrontational or an angry conversation, but you can really speak about the work that you're doing in your church or your parish at the local level.
Yeah, Feeding America has so many faith-based organizations as food banks and partners. And so, I think that they're critically important, especially our food bank CEOs who are just right there on the front line and have so many good relationships with their members of Congress and senators that they're able to really bring that frontline perspective in the district. So great point, Heather.
We have a few questions in the Q&A, and don't forget that if you have any question, no question is too small or too big, throw it in the Q&A and we will get to it. But here's a little inside the Beltway question for you all. Between now and the end of the year, we have what they call the lame duck session, where there's an opportunity to get this year's agenda and this year's priorities across the table. What do you see, what can be accomplished between now and December 31st? And I'm sure with three of you guys here, we may have three different answers. So there is no wrong answer in all this. But from y'all's perspective, what do you see as opportunities for us to try to accomplish this year, for the remainder of this year?
I mean,
I'll let Jason kick it off.
Okay, Jason, you go first.
Jason, you kick it off.
Yeah, that's a big question. I think that there are several ways that I could go. I'm going to tell you what we'll be pushing for in the lame duck, because I think that's the best way to answer this question. I think that the first big thing is the expanded child tax credit. Trying to move that through before the end of the lame duck to ensure that the families have access to the resources that they need through that program. It was extraordinarily effective when it was passed in the Relief Act. And so I think that there's a small opportunity there to potentially get that through, find some compromise and move that across the finish line before the end of the year. I think the other thing is around CNR. The House obviously passed their package out of committee. I don't think that whole package stands a chance in this lame duck session, but we know that Senator Bozeman and Senator Stabenow are working together to try to find some compromise on what in that package might be able to move across the finish line as part of the omnibus package at the end of this year. And so we, and in partnership with the anti-hunger community, are going to continue pushing for that. Trying to get some movement, at least on some of those priorities, because it's been over a decade since we had a CNR pass, and so really getting some updates to those programs is key, I think, in this lame duck session.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I agree with Jason. We're pushing for many of the same things. Obviously, child nutrition reauthorization. I wish I was had to answer this tomorrow because I'm on the Hill this afternoon having a lot of conversations with Republicans. But it's definitely child nutrition reauthorization, the child tax credit. We don't know what that could look like, but that's something that we are pushing for. We know that it's a huge factor in poverty and hunger in families. We are also, of course, hoping for, an appropriations, to get finished and for all of that to come to conclusion. And then we're also GFSA, we do international work as well. So the Global Food Security Act is a top priority of ours, as well as the alliances. So those are what we're pushing.
Yeah, I think we're hearing and seeing the possibility of the appropriators coming together on top line numbers, which I think is very encouraging. I believe that we are going to see a final appropriations bill just with the retirements of Leahy and Shelby. And so we are looking and tracking and pushing for the 100 million in TFAP funding in the appropriations bill. And so we're really kind of focused on that. That will continue to help support the growing need that we've seen as a result of inflation and still the pandemic and supply chain disruptions and things on other front. The other thing I'd like to add is in the for the National Defense Authorization Act, there's efforts to address military hunger in that bill. And so we're tracking that very closely. As you know, many of our food banks work closely with the military community and helping to meet their needs, as they're deployed across the nation. So that's something that's critically important. And, we thank the leadership of Maison in terms of really trying to move this along. And so it's been great working with all of the anti-hunger groups on this particular effort. And it's something that actually enjoys bipartisan support, as it should. I think the other piece is that there's summer EBT in the approps bill. So that's one that we've always continued to track along the way. And hopefully we'll see another modest increase in that particular line item in appropriations. And then, of course, I think we're all hopeful that we'll see a CNR bill. It won't include everything that we want. But I think we recognize the important provisions of non-congregate feeding in terms of how that has really been a game changer in helping us to expand our reach. And I think we can think innovatively about that. And I think everyone recognizes the important role that those flexibilities have played in helping us to meet the needs of kids throughout the pandemic as well as families. So I think that we'll be tracking all of those pieces as well, and CTC, but we're keeping our eye on the prize on appropriations because that really is the one that I think will be critically important as we go forward.
And I will, Monica, on the first week when I was at Bread, I think I had a conversation with Monica about non-congregate feeding. So we've been talking about this for a long time.
I think people go, Monica, non-congregate feeding Gonzales.
That's what I'm just going to call you now when I see you on the
I would also say that in the child nutrition reauthorizations, also opportunities to modernize and put some improvements towards the WIC program as well, which I know has strong support. So like you said, while this package may not have everything we want, we're hoping that it does include some significant increases. And like Jason pointed out, CNR hasn't passed in over a decade. So these improvements would definitely put us on par from where we were 12 years ago when the last legislation passed.
Yeah. Eric, I got a question in my chat too, which I can respond to after Monica's done.
No, I just want to build on everything you said, Eric, about WIC and how critically important that is. And we know that USDA is set to come out with kind of a rule that will incorporate the recommendations from the National Academies of Sciences. And, that is just critically important that program is updated to help families, especially women and children, get a healthy start in life and address a lot of the diet related chronic diseases that really include obesity, diabetes. And so, making sure that kids and families have a healthy start is so critically important. So we're looking forward to that rule.
And somebody asked me about that many anti-hunger orgs have developed leadership teams with people who have lived experience as we continue to move through the challenging politics. How can we engage these conservative-leaning politicians? And I think my answer is when you look at, first of all, I don't really judge any member before I form a relationship with them or their office, good or bad. I mean, I don't trust the media. I don't trust. My job is to work with everyone on both sides of the aisle. And so I take that very seriously and do my research, and I'll do that with new members. If you have a strong group of people, I think these new members of Congress are really going to want to be engaged right at the beginning. Look how the close races and the close majority is really helping us, I think, in this local engagement. I think people will be very responsive. I think it's putting together the right group of people. And of course, lived experience is the number one priority. But are there people who know these members directly? A lot of the conservative members are very active in their churches. That's a way to identify folks who might be willing to advocate for you. So I think, you have to look at the member of Congress. You can't write them off immediately. Have that staff meeting if it's available, and just tell them that, welcome them to representing your district. Don't talk about politics, and really talk about the issues at hand and how we can make change. And the Farm Bill is that possibility to do that.
I would also, just building on everything that Heather said, is that, hunger doesn't live in a Republican or Democratic district. It lives across the country, unfortunately. And so we have all of our neighbors live in Republican, Democratic, independent districts. It doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, they're a voter. They're somebody who are a constituent of those representatives. And so, they have a powerful voice, and they can bring that forward and share their experience. And so at the end of the day, I think it's important to recognize that our neighbors are also voting constituents of all members of Congress and senators.
And certain issues are also more attractive to conservatives than others. I've had really good conversations with conservatives, with tribal groups, for instance. Definitely coming in on SNAP alone might make that conversation a little trickier. So I think it is a little bit of a nuanced message. You don't have to get everything out in that first meeting. You want to build that relationship so you can work with this office for the term of 2 or 6 years.
And I'll just add that, Senator Bozeman has really led in terms of trying to address summer hunger. And so I think when you look at his bill, which is bipartisan, that does include sponsors such as Mitch McConnell and Hoeven and other Republicans, I think we have to, remember that these are representatives and senators who do understand the important need of feeding people and families in their communities. So, many of the bills that really do move the needle and get across the finish line are the ones that are bipartisan. And I think if you look at Senator Braun in terms of the work that he's done and his interest in medically tailored meals, as well as other issues, they are there, and we can find those opportunities where we can come together.
That's a great point, Monica.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, I agree with everything. Sorry, Eric, just really quickly. I think that it comes down to hunger as a nonpartisan issue. We may differ on how we think that we can best address it. We may differ on some of the pieces on the edges of the conversation. But at the end of the day, there's not a single member of Congress, a single senator, governor, mayor who wants folks in their community to be hungry. And so it's finding that common ground and finding ways to really leverage them that, as Monica just said, keeps things able to move forward along years and years, decades, because parties are going to shift. The politics are going to change. But the one thing that we can do is make sure that you have a broad ideological spectrum of folks who understand the nuances and the issues here and continue to build those champions across the aisle so that they're working together when these things come up, because these issues unfortunately aren't going away anytime soon. So we got to make sure that we're building that political will over the long term.
No, I would agree with everything that our panel is saying. And it really brings me to the next question, which is always, I like to end our questions on a positive note. And we talked about how hunger, really is a bipartisan issue. It just has to get above, sometimes has to get above the noise. And we talk about the opportunities. We talk about, the slim majority that the Republicans may have in the House, that it looks like, and, Democrats will have a slim majority in the Senate. So with that, where do you see opportunities for us to engage? In order to make something happen, there have to be bipartisan support in some capacity. So where do you see some of our biggest opportunities in 2023?
I mean, I think, oh, go ahead, Monica.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think looking at examples like Monica, so I can just turn it right over to you, just stated things like summer meals has traditionally been very bipartisan. I mean, there are bipartisan efforts. I think coming in and just talking about the Farm Bill in general with certain members isn't the way to go. But I think there is opportunity. There are slim majorities, like you said, Eric, and that's an opportunity for advocates and for us. All these House members are going to be up in 2 years, and there's going to be a host. It's a 2024 election, so there's going to be a lot going on. So we have to take advantage of this opportunity and not let it's in chaos get to us, and really focus on moving our agenda forward.
I would just say, if there's one thing we learned from the pandemic, is that, the things that really move the needle and where people saw opportunity to build on innovations or to think more outside of the box were usually some of those bipartisan efforts. And so I think that, we have to go into the next session with a mindset that we can most definitely find those areas of opportunities where there is consensus. And I think the innovation is one piece of that. And I also think at the same time, it's how are we going to continue to build out relationships with the growing sector of industries that are in the food and nutrition space. If you had asked me if Instacart or DoorDash would be sitting with us at the Farm Bill conversation, I don't know if I would have said yes to that, in the last go around in 2018. But we're having those conversations with them, right? We're having conversations with folks who came into during the pandemic and were part of the solution. So we want to keep that momentum going. And so I think that there is going to be opportunities, and I think there's too much of an emphasis on the partisanship. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of room. And I think if GT Thompson, in terms of what he said and what his goals are, I think we all share those goals. The devil will be in the details, but I do think that we can definitely get there. So, I am looking forward to this opportunity and excited to be leading this on behalf of Feeding America.
I can agree more with what Heather and Monica shared at the federal level. I'm actually going to turn it on its head a little bit and talk a little bit about the state and local side, because I think the election results, while they were close at the federal level, in a lot of states across the country, that's not the case. There's a really strong momentum, especially for some of the governors who got reelected with big margins. For them they have a mandate, and they can move things forward in a pretty big way in states across the country. So I think we're going to see a lot of action at the state level, especially as a lot of states still have unspent pandemic funds that they haven't allocated yet, that are going to be in the crosshairs of the federal government to kind of claw those funds back if you don't spend them quickly. So I think you're going to see a lot of states are going to have some money to invest in programs that they may not have looked at before. And state budgets are in fairly good shape, with tax revenues and things kind of peaking and not necessarily looking as bad as a lot of state executives thought they might. So I think that there are going to be a lot of opportunities for legislation at the state level. And I also think in localities where not only do they have some of those unspent COVID funds as well, but there's also an appetite for them to innovate and set themselves apart, give themselves kind of a platform to grow off of. And as has been said multiple times throughout this conversation, we learned a lot during the pandemic. In talking to mayors and even city council folks and folks on school boards, they understand the importance of these programs in a way that they never did before, because they saw the impact of the pandemic and how close so many people are to the edge, and how just a small thing in their lives can really put the edge. So they've innovated, they've tried new things during the pandemic, and so it's on all of us to help them find ways to continue those going into the next year. As they have the ability to really change policy at the local and state level, and really move some innovative things forward that then we can hopefully replicate at the federal side as well.
That's a great point, Jason, and actually it's really relevant for this group here, as many of these organizations and our coalitions here locally are more plugged in or easily plugged in to their state capitals and their city councils and their mayor's offices, more so than even on the federal level. So for direct engagement and direct impact, some of the things that you're talking about here, even from a national perspective, can reflect talking points and message points that are just as important on the state level, which oftentimes, oftentimes the states have to show leadership. On the federal level, they will replicate. So I think what you just showed is like all the levels of engagement that many of our partners can join, this movement to put us on path to ending hunger. It's not just from the federal level, but it's also on the state and local. So appreciate your comments. I want to just use this opportunity to thank my esteemed panel for their expertise, for this very important conversation. If there's any follow-up, or if they would like to learn, hear more from your organizations, give you guys a chance to kind of give one more plug for your organization, for the group.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really happy to be here, and I look forward to working. I was looking at the attendees' names. I don't know most of you, but I look forward to working with everyone. I'm a former Republican staffer. I'm happy to help out with Republican messaging. Please feel free to get in contact with me. I can tell you just one final note. I was at the American Enterprise Institute gala last night, and I was talking to a senator, and he's like, I remember the photos, of the cars going through picking up food during the pandemic. So that's still in their minds. They still remember that. I know a lot of us are trying to say we're moving on and the pandemic and all of that, but Congress knows. So we just have to reinforce this message from the local level. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Monica, Jason?
Yeah, I'll just say that one, I think that, Feeding America is always excited to be part of the alliance. I think that, we really have certainly appreciated the leadership that you have provided, especially throughout the pandemic, and being an incredible partner. And we're really excited about our Neighbors Initiative and the work that Barbie will be leading, as well as our Impact Equity Fund that we have launched to really kind of dig deeper into the work and making sure that we're thinking and approaching food insecurity and hunger through an equity lens, as well as, working very closely with the CEOs of our food bank network and everyone on their teams, as they really try to make sure that they're meeting the needs on the front lines. So, we know it always feels like it's an all hands on deck moment, especially through the holidays where so many families are really being hit hard. And this is a very busy time for our food bank network. So we're just going to continue to be fighting the good fight, standing shoulder to shoulder with all of the folks on this call, as well as others and many of you out in the community. And so please reach out to us and let us know how we can work with you to help amplify your voice and where we can support you to join us in this fight.
Eric, I will take 2 seconds. I know we're almost out of time. Feel free to reach out anytime. I just put my email address in the chat. Feel free to reach out. Would love to partner with you all and hear your ideas on how we can do better.
Well, thank you. I want to give our audience, our panel, a virtual round of applause and finger snaps. And just thank you all for joining us today. And Tanya, I'll turn it over to you.